Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Coaching Unpacked. Everybody cheers. Yay! We are back. We're back. Is it Thursday? It's a Thursday night here in live land. Out there we're on X and we're on LinkedIn if you're watching. And if you're listening to us in the car, it's whatever time you would like it to be. My name is Chris. I'm here with Sarah Cottinghatt and Adam Kohlbeck. And this is it was regular and then work got in the way. So it became a semi-regular podcast, Unpacking Coaching. We've just come back from a weekend in Manchester. Sarah, what were we doing in Manchester?
Oh, I know what I was doing. I don't know what you were doing. Maybe we'll find out, or maybe that's for our later show.
The 11 p.m. version. Good grief.
We were at the Thinking Deeply About Primary Education podcast events.
It was great. It was like a conference, but good.
It was brilliant. It's really, really good. Kira Mackle, who is a primary maths specialist and all-round awesome person, has organised these events, and we went to Adam and I went to one in London, and then we all went to the one in Manchester on Saturday.
It was great, and we wore our branded hoodies because that's right. Because if you aren't following us, then you aren't listening to this. But if you have stumbled upon us, we've got branded hoodies now because branded hoodies, or it didn't happen. That's where I'm at. Adam, did you have a good weekend? Because you then went and visited somewhere else, not education related.
Yeah, so I dragged my 13-year-old along to education conference. And,
a neglectful crime, I think.
I was thoroughly embarrassed when he had his legs stretched out all over a table or something at one point. but yeah, no, we did that, and then we went up to. I put him through the torture of going to see Old Trafford and in all its glory, which
I think is an equal crime of neglect. Is disgusting.
He did ask if we could go to a game. I was like, not yet.
Guys, let's crack on with our podcast today in our episode, because what people have told us they like about our podcast is that it's quite short and you could.
Brilliant. That is a glowing review, isn't it? What a glowing endorsement of a podcast.
There's not much of it. Yeah, it ends quickly after it starts.
Is that it's digestible? Is that the way? Like a piece of undigested beef. That's for you English teachers out there. So today's episode, we're talking about accountable thinking. But when we started looking at this, I didn't really know what that meant. And kind of my de facto role is talking to these two brilliant coaching minds and trying to translate it into my oops, I did a coach world, which is where I come from. But what we were discussing was that in a coaching conversation, to kind of get the most out of it, we keep our thinking accountable to student learning. So there's that link there all the time. We always go, what are we doing, and is it best for student learning? I think David Didow was on, who's a previous EduPulse guest, one of our first actually, I think, Adam. He said today on X there was a thread about adaptive teaching. A blog had been done. It was really, really good. But then Adam Boxer kind of said, I don't agree with that word. Why can't we just call it teaching? And I have a thing about quality first teaching. That annoys me. I don't like that title. That's another thing. And then David was talking about kind of if you aren't constantly assessing your student in the moment, and then if you aren't adapting based on that assessing, then they're not learning and you're not teaching well. And I thought that was really short and snappy, because what we're saying is quite obvious, isn't it? But it can actually be quite hard to link the coaching that we're doing with our coaches, to link that into student learning can feel a little bit awkward. And so what we should probably do is with our teachers is model that accountable thinking as well. So Sarah, shall we have a bit of a chat about how we might be able to do that?
Yeah, definitely. So Adam and I have been thinking about some particular techniques, and we have the absolute pleasure of writing a book with Dr. Hailey Hughes about coaching, where we are
Dr. Professor Hailey Hughes, thank you very much.
Dr. Professor Hailey Hughes, yeah. She's fantastic, and we've been working together to kind of codify some of this stuff and some of the techniques that can kind of keep our thinking accountable. As you said, Chris, are like we've used some of them before in previous podcasts, so hopefully they'll people will remember them. Around surfacing the teacher's mental model of the goal for that situation that you want to focus on, and what they noticed and their reasons for their decisions. Crucially, really great coaches do a lot of preparation, where when they observe the teacher, they write down specifically what's happening in a situation. They keep it nice and flat and non-judgmental, and they just write down what they see. And that enables them to do another technique, which we're calling spotlight specifics. And this can keep you not just accountable to learning, but also accountable to like what happened in the situation. Obviously, if you've got video, that really helps as well with this, but sometimes people don't use video or don't have access to video. So writing things down really specifically is really important so that you can spotlight those specifics, and hopefully you'll see that in the example we're about to give. And finally, it's just what you said, Chris, there about linking to learning, and that's the third technique. So we've got surfacing mental model, spotlight specifics, and linking to learning, and hopefully you will hear the coach doing some of this.
Well, considering you just said about Spotlight, which is the premier magazine for performing artists out there, Adam, I think, has been shocked by the amount of performing arts he's had to do in this podcast, because I don't think he ever thought of himself as an actor. But I mean, you jump in and out of role like a pro. Robert De Niro is waiting. I've got to say,
when it comes to like acting as a coach or a teacher, it's like I'm just living in role all the time.
I don't know about this adolescence nonsense and all the craziness about Stephen Graham. One take. This is one take, Adam. Like, there's no editing here. This is it. This is you. You are the South Stephen Graham.
Well, I'll take that. I will definitely take that. Before we dive in, though, can I just say one thing? Just like why I think that this is so important as well. This idea of accountable thinking, because I think one of the things that where coaching can go a little bit awry is when coaches coach on something that they think is a good idea, or like just because it's something they think is a good idea. So on their preference. So, and I really like to see mini whiteboards used in a lesson. So I'm going to coach you to use mini whiteboards because I saw you ask a question and you didn't use mini whiteboards. Like, and it might well be that mini whiteboards is the absolute right thing that you should be doing at that moment in time. But it's really important to make sure that the coach is also accountable for their thinking, and actually, have you thought that through and thought actually that technique is the right thing for this particular moment, for this particular purpose? And are you sure it's not just that you think, oh, that's something that I really like to see, so I'm going to coach on that. So it's about the coach's accountable thinking as well, to make sure that we're not just kind of in this constant cycle of coach's preference or leadership's preference. That was just a quick thought.
I love that. Really, really nice. Just as you were talking, just making sure like all the things were working, and I typed kinked in instead of LinkedIn, which I've got to tell you is a different website.
Yeah.
Just happened then. Then we're live. So what are we going to do? Right, we've spoken about accountable thinking. So Adam, it is now time to step through the glittery star of stars in their eyes, and I think you're going to need to give us some context for this conversation, well, so we can dive in and do what we're good at, which is live coaching.
Okay, all right. So this conversation, I'm a teacher, and I've done a check for understanding, and I've let some students off from having to participate. So in the coaching conversation, I don't really see the issue with that, so I don't see why it's a problem. Sarah's the coach, and she's using the techniques that we've mentioned to keep our conversation really accountable to student learning. So she's going to keep on coming back to that idea of student learning. Okay, let's go.
Okay, Adam, let's go back to that moment when you posed the word problem to your class just after you finished modelling. What was your goal in that moment?
So I wanted them to think. It through independently. Then I wanted them to show their answer on their mini whiteboards. And I think really I was just trying to get like a clear sense of who understood the method.
So you were checking for understanding and getting a snapshot of what they could do on their own?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And then what happened?
Well, some students showed answers, but not everybody. But honestly, like, just to get to this point quickly, that didn't really bother me. So I felt like the lesson had a really good pace to it, and I don't want to slow things down just because a few kids haven't got answers on whiteboards. I can't be doing that all the time.
Yeah, I totally get you wanting to keep the pace,
Mhm.
but let's spotlight specifically what happened. So I noticed that 5 students got their boards up quickly. A few were still uncapping their pens. 1 or 2 were looking around, and I noticed the pair by the window whispering. You gave a little nudge. You said, "Come on, let's go," and then you started explaining the answer.
Yeah, so yeah, sounds about right.
So if your goal was to check who'd understood, how much did you get to see?
Well, I suppose in terms of what I actually saw, like not loads, but I did see a few boards. But to be honest, I was kind of guessing. Well, not guessing. I was kind of predicting that the rest would be on track, and that's, to be honest, using what I know about those kids. I know that they are, more often than not, they're fine, they're on track. So again, it wasn't really something that bothered.
Right. And I know it didn't feel like a big deal in the moment, but skipping that check meant you didn't really know that they grasped it. And that's quite a tough position for you to teach from, when we know it's best for student learning if we build from what they currently understand.
Yeah. No, I guess thinking about it, yeah, I prioritised pace over clarity. And yeah, I guess I didn't catch that at the time. Yeah, that's a good point.
And now that we've named it, it's fixable. What to work out to tighten that moment next time, so we can work together to kind of get the full picture and tighten that up. Should we do that?
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Bam.
I really love that, but I am going to step in here because we're live. Sarah, do you want to go and check on Harry?
Did you hear the screams?
Yeah, you go check on Harry. Check on you're a working mother.
He's actually my husband's out watching Chelsea, so it's me and Harry, and he was crying, but now he's gone quiet. So let's carry on, see if we can continue.
Listen, you are a hero. You're a working mother, and if you need to stop to do some, I know we've just kind of done that coaching thing, but I was co-writer, co-composer of a musical called the Good Enough Mums Club, that did a big couple of UK tours, and it was mothers and mothers only. It was by mothers for mothers, and we the company provided daycare and stuff. So I'm all like, you go and do that if you need to. It's important. I think it's important to role model that. Anyway, so a couple of things that I noticed. So other than like Adam being really the penny dropping, which felt a little bit like the famous, now should we call it the cake bread moment, when you asked Ollie in that video that it's on your Substack, it's in the talks, it's on one of our episodes of just that. And how does that link to the goal? Oh well, it doesn't. Listen, I don't know whether that was a good impression of Ollie.
I don't know if I was coaching Oliver Twist or
isn't
something
offended by
today.
that. I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. It was just a little bit of a moment where the penny dropped. So I noticed that in your reply, you were saying it, instead of saying to the teacher, right, that should really have bothered you because it impacted student learning, Sarah. There was something there because you looped back to what had happened in the lesson, and then the teacher's goal. So going back to that because it was a good one. To me, as somebody who's partially coaching skeptic, and you're winning me over, that felt gentler and that felt doable, and it felt kinder and more authentic than just kind of saying, how did that link to the student learning? That wasn't very good, was it? So that's deliberate, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that you've highlighted something there that's really important. It's not just being accountable to student learning. So how are our actions and our conversation accountable to student learning, but also accountable to the context and what happened. And I think you can only really do that when you capture specifics and you spotlight those specifics. So when you're observing, if you capture that, like I talk about it as being like flat, that kind of flat what's happening. And I was saying to Adam earlier, it's a bit like a stenographer in a court. And it's like, you're not the judge or the jury. you're the stenographer and you're capturing.
Yeah.
And Adam said, what's a stenographer? I was like, okay, maybe this is not a very good analogy then. But I think that's the right way of thinking about it. Like when you spotlight specifics, you draw that person back into what happened, and it's not a judgmental thing. You're right, Chris. It's like it's kinder than saying like, no, I disagree. But if you bring things back to student learning, which is our ultimate goal, back to specifically what happened, then yeah, it does, I think, come across as much kinder, and also just kind of more useful. And it reminds me of something that Ollie Cav said to me once, which is like, I've said this before in this podcast, but I'll keep saying it because I think it's brilliant. You can either be right or you can get results. And I feel like this is in the getting results camp. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, do you know, I think that actually if you sort of analyse some of the words that you use, you could, and you just looked at them on a page or like on a board, I think that like there's an argument to say that you're actually quite direct. So like, yes, it was kind, but it was also quite direct. So you did say at one point, you said, I think it was a couple of points where you said to me, yeah, I get what you're saying. So you validated what I was saying. I get what you're saying, but there's this thing as well. So you were quite insistent on the fact that there's a connection here to how learning works that you haven't made a link to, Adam. And I am going to keep pushing you to make that link. The first time I almost felt like I was not trying to get out of it, but the first time, if you'd have just let that go, I'd have felt a little bit like, I didn't actually have to do any hard thinking. You weren't going to hold me to account for thinking about learning, but you came back a second time. So like, yes, it is kinder, but that doesn't mean that it's not direct, because I actually felt like that was really direct. And I think that's the point really, is that why could Sarah be so direct with me? Well, actually, I think that the way that she approached that conversation as the coach was, she had like a real belief that I had the knowledge. She knew that I knew that actually I had to check everybody. She knew that she could get me to accept that checking everybody would be the best thing to do, because it would give me the firmest base from which to build my next piece of teaching from, because I'd properly understand what everybody understood. So she knew I knew that stuff. She just knew that I wasn't making the connection, and she wasn't going to let me off making the connection. And it's the connecting bit that is the thinking that the teacher does in that conversation. I know this, I know this, I know that this happened, but now I've got to really think about how those things relate and interconnect. And that's the bit that is A, accountable thinking, and B, that's the thing that Sarah did not let me get away with there. She really pushed me to make the connections between those pieces.
But isn't that what's important? Because euphemistically, we were talking about Ollie and we were saying, that the penny drops. But that's what we really mean when we say the penny drops, is that somebody has an intrusive thought has landed right in the center of their thinking, and that all of the dots have come together, and it's like, oh, of course. And that allows them to do that deeper thinking about the thing that the seed that you have planted. And that's quite joyous to be there for that moment and hold them in that and be like, yeah, so how do we now move that forward and link that back to your goal? So were you going to say something then, Sarah?
Yeah, I think you've sort of made me think of a few things there, though, both of you as well. So one is like, Adam, that kind of kindness is clarity piece, like actually like being nice to somebody about something, going, yeah, no, well, yeah, you're right, isn't always the kindest thing to do, is it? And that's the accountability, is the continuing to push for what's best for student learning, and continuing to revert back to, look, this is what happened. And that's why I truly believe the most powerful question you can start by asking is, what was your goal in this situation? Because then you can hold them accountable. If it's a good goal, it's their goal. You can hold them accountable to their goal. You're not forcing anything on them. It's their goal. So I really, truly think that question holds so much power. And then on what you were saying there, Chris, about like that penny drop moment, I think, like, we've done that episode on engineering insight, which I really encourage people to listen to, because it's awesome, because it's got Adam's video in it of that penny drop moment. And this accountability can have that effect as well. I think but it's also kind of the effect of like, I want to say like it's just that kick up the bum a little
Mhm.
bit as well, isn't it? Of like, you can do this, a bit like we just said there, Adam, of like the belief that like, you can do this thinking, and I'm not going to kind of let you off the hook. And I think that coaches can sometimes be a bit worried that they're going to annoy the coachee by keeping them accountable, but you don't. The coachee gets to the end of the conversation and feels like they've really achieved something. A bit like, it's just the same as any student learning, when you get them to that point where they're like, yes, I've got it. And that hard work to get there. So I think that I just sort of say, like, keep yourselves, both of you, accountable in the conversation to student learning and to what happened in the lesson.
So,
It's really funny. You've just made me think in a previous life.
Yeah.
Now listen, before we started, I said there was a dirty lag on this live, didn't I, Adam? So you go, and I'll come in with my chipper story in a second. No, you go. You're the coach.
Sorry. I was just a bit overexcited with this bit because we were doing some interviews today at school, and part of the interview process is so the person will teach a lesson, but then they have a coaching session after that. So so rather than kind of sit and tell us about your lesson, they have a coaching session, because actually, like, what I'm interested in is not like how good a lesson did they teach today in front of 30 kids that they don't really know, because I sort of back us as a school that we can help everybody get better at teaching, so long as they want to get better, and so long as they're like on board with the culture of continuous improvement. So we say, okay, we'll give you a coaching session, and then at the end of it, we go, how did that feel? Like, what did you think of that? And ultimately, like, would you be up for having that every week? And this one particular candidate said, yeah, like, it's like really felt like you care about me getting better. And it's like that's I think what this is about. This kind of constantly pushing to, you've got to be accountable for how this is going to make learning better. Not because I'm trying to be difficult, or because like it makes me feel clever to pick something out that you could work on and makes me feel important, or whatever it is. It's about, like, I really care about you getting better at teaching, because firstly, like, I care about it from the student's point of view, but secondly, I also care about it for you as the teacher, because it's going to feel great when you go into a class, you do something, you're like, that worked better.
Yes.
Like, that's such a joyous moment. Like, yes, got something. Good, let's go. Next thing. So yeah, I think that's super important with this as well.
It is important because, we've got SLTs and school leaders who want the best for their students, and we're saying that the best thing for the students is excellent professional development, which we think an excellent mechanism for that is this type of coaching and doing what we're saying. Otherwise, we wouldn't be saying it publicly. We think this really works, and we have to convince them, these people that are time and money poor, that this can be done, and it's going to have great links to student learning. And the little analogy I was going to say before we move on to the end bit was, when I was a peripatetic singing teacher for 10 years, and I would always have singing lessons. And that, in the performing arts world, that is not unusual for performing arts teachers to go to class, to keep up their conditioning. Dance teachers go to dance classes, and you'll be there and you go, what are you doing? You teach me. Well, I'm learning. Why? What are you doing here? And when I used to go for my singing lessons with my singing teacher, she'd always preface it with, I know you know this, but you're sticking your jaw out. I know you know this, but posture. And as a teacher, I'd be going, I know this. Why am I not applying it to myself? Why am I not doing this right now? And for me, this type of coaching opens up both of those windows, because, we're talking about how coaches can and do be better. Can and do be better.
Can be.
Yeah, can be and do better, not can and do be better. Listen, it's nearly the end of term. Can and do be, that's the priest down the road from me. No, that was awful.
What's awful?
That we can't even edit that out. It's not even a Catholic church down the road. It's not. That doesn't hold sway. What am I trying to say? The world opens up both ways. If we're improving our teacher, the coach is being improved as well. That's what I'm getting from this. Because if the deep thinking is happening, then their teaching practice will be, this isn't America. Our coaches aren't in schools centrally employed, sat there waiting to coach people. Our coaches are teachers. And I think there's kind of like a nice reciprocal loop that's going on there. I do want to ask, though, Sarah, you said link it back to the teacher's goal. That's always the most important thing. But what if the goal is the problem? To put a slight span in the works, what do we say to the teacher if they're like, oh well, my goal was just to see if a sample of them understood, when actually you as the coach suspect that they actually need and could have checked everybody. So what if the very thing that you said is important to go back to, what if that needs fixing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That is really where being accountable to student learning is so important, because your situation goal in any situation that a teacher's in during a lesson is fueled by their knowledge of teaching and learning. So if the teacher's just taught something really important, they've just modelled something really important, like they have in this example, and then they have asked a question about it, and then say there's independent practice afterwards, and they are only interested in a small sample of people's responses, you have to heighten their awareness. And then if they don't get it, then tell them that it's probably wise at that point to find out what everybody knows, because it's such an important concept. You can't like just hoof it and just judge it on the fly. You need to know what people know. So you would probably start by I would probably start anyway by saying, like, the question that you asked came just after your modelling and right before the independent practice, and it was about a really core idea that you were teaching. Did you want everyone's answers at that point? Like, to sort of like make it, that is quite direct, but did you want everyone's answers at that point? And if they say again, like, no, I think a sample was fine, I'd say, because it was such a core idea, I think that you would want everyone's answers at that point, because that's what's going to best support kind of student learning moving forward. So I think, ask, then tell. That's very much what Josh Goodrich talks about in his book, asking, telling, and then asking again. And I think that kind of applies here as well. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, definitely. I think that sometimes as well, something that I find myself doing a bit in situations like that, when I think that the goal isn't strong enough. In this example, so it's, so you could ask, if the teacher kept pushing back and was like, actually, no, I think like the sample is absolutely fine, you could also ask something like, okay, well, why don't you need to know if Jack understands? Like, name the child. Like, what is it about this particular child that means that you don't need to know if they understand? Because then that gives that teacher something really concrete to talk about. And I think that when they try and talk around that concrete person, I think that then can quite quickly kind of heighten their awareness of, actually, I'm talking about people here, aren't I? Like, of course, like Jack, I need to know if Jack understands just as much as I need to know if everyone else understands. And even if you get the answer, well, Jack always understands, so it's fine. So I didn't really need to check him. It's then a case of, but can you be certain that Jack understands? Has there ever been anything that Jack hasn't understood first time?
That's a really interesting point, Adam. Yeah. And like, that is so powerful what you just said, like bringing it back to the human beings obviously in front of you. That question, I think you could do with any one of your coaches that I've watched you with, because you have such a good relationship. I wonder if it would feel quite confronting if it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering whether you might like sometimes skip forward to like evidence from later in the lesson as well, if you were still in it, and say, like, I noticed in the independent task there were a few that, or you had to firefight a bit, or like you had to kind of go to several people, and maybe if we checked everybody, it might have been easier for you to kind of, I don't know, is that I really like your approach, and I could do that with some of the people I coach, but possibly not everybody.
Can I answer with my Senko hat on? Because I think if we're teaching to the top through the eyes of send, which is a really trite way of putting it, but it's nice and neat. So we're teaching to the top through the eyes of send, then what is good for our most disadvantaged and most struggling students is going to be good for everyone, and that's where we see the adaptive stuff, like, kind of can't say differentiation anymore, can you? Whatever the new word for that is. But could you not, because this is clear, it's about relationships. And I think you're bang on there, Sarah. This is you know, you can be direct to be kind. My mom, she goes, "Do you like my new painting?" And I'm like, no, not really, because life's too short. I'm not going to stand there and be like, "Oh yes, it's gorgeous." Like, no, actually, well, it's not really. That's not really you, Mum. I thought this was going to go in a different room. So you know, you can have that relationship with a coach you know really well. But I think to get to Adam's point about linking it to concrete humans, that's a direct quote. Then can you not say, okay, say to your coach, to your coachee, can you think about five young people in your class that always struggle to get this? Can you not think about, because I hate the phrase bottom 20%. It's a very mainstream thing to say. But if people understand what I mean by that, you know, what about pick someone from your bottom 20%? Have you spoken to them? Did you need to check their understanding? So you're calling out Jack's name, you're just not naming him because you don't know the teacher that well, and all you're doing is speaking to one of their teacher standards, right? All you're kind of saying is, can you think about the most hard to reach in your class? Has your questioning there reached them? Would that be acceptable? If you don't know them very well and you don't know their class, so you can't say, what about Jack?
I think personally, yeah, it would. I think really what you're trying to get at is one of two things. You're either trying to get them to zoom in on like a particular child or a particular group of children. Either it's somebody that you know hasn't understood because you've gone around and checked, or you're naming a child to make them zoom in on and become aware of the fact that actually, like every individual is important. It's not necessarily about Jack. It's about the
Poor
the
Jack.
understanding. Yeah. It's about the understanding that it gives the teacher, that, or the realization that hopefully they get, which is, it is about every individual, isn't it? I'm kind of thinking about it from my point of view as the teacher, but it's actually about every individual. I think you're right, Sarah. I think it could potentially come across as, and you've got to know the people that you're coaching. It's also got to be authentically you as well, because that is I appreciate that's a really challenging type of question to ask, and if that's not authentically you, that's really difficult to pull off. I think another question that you could ask instead would be, okay, so why is trading off certainty of understanding for pace worth it? Why is that a worthwhile trade-off to make? Because actually that again pushes to think about, okay, you're telling me that you've traded off understanding. I don't need to check everyone's understanding because lesson pace is more important. Okay, tell me why that's more important. You can see where that's going to go. It's going to what? Because I've got to get on. I've got to cover stuff. I've got curriculum to get through. Yeah. Okay, what's the risk of going through the curriculum so quickly that some children aren't securing their understanding? Well, inevitably the answer comes that, okay, well, I've covered the whole curriculum, but it hasn't really done me much good because they've not learned it as I've covered it. Okay, so then let's bring that right the way back. How do you know they haven't learned it? Well, I don't until I get to the end. So what can we do along the way? We got to check. Great. Back to where we are then, right? So this is why it's worth checking rather than.
That's really nice. I really like that, and I think that the wider picture of this, because we only show these small snapshots of conversations, and there's two things that I think is really important here. We've talked about is the relationship you have with your coachee matters, and I think like that's so. I feel like when people say that, it's really airy-fairy. But one concrete thing that I think is so important is that you are a role model in the way that you think about teaching and learning. So if you are always holding yourself accountable in your teaching and your coaching to student learning, to what happened in the stenographer sense during the lesson, then you almost have the right to ask questions like that and to pull the teacher back. But if you do what Adam said at the beginning as like a pitfall, which is where you talk about teaching and you decouple it from learning, so you're just talking about like, I prefer it when you do this, then you don't really have the right to pull the teacher back into thinking about learning. So you have to make sure you don't decouple teaching from learning, and you don't have to make sure that you don't skip to the solution and that you sit in the problem and try to understand what's happening in a situation, and that you hold yourself as a coach accountable in your thinking, in the conversation to learning, and be that role model.
I love that.
Yeah, that's it. I think You've done it, Sarah. You've accidentally ended the episode because it's just she got. I'm going to say this to the end, and then just going to go. Boop, done, and we're off. For those not watching the Visualize podcast, Chris just dropped his mic within the screen and caught it, which is very rare, and none of his ex-girlfriends would ever have believed that was possible. I'm not very sporty. Sarah and Adam, it has been a joy to see you. For what have we done? We've done 34 minutes, short but digestible, unlike Scrooge's beef.
It's what everybody likes about the podcast. It's the only thing everybody likes about the podcast.
It's painless and quick.
Wait till we try and do the Christmas Carol thing again. That'll work. As Sarah said, we've got plenty of episodes. I'm just going to jump onto our other screen because for Coaching Unpacked we have, oh grief, as Sarah just said, the engineering insights with the cake bread moment. That's brilliant.
That's just phenomenal. You have to watch that. If you haven't watched it, in 2 minutes, Adam engineers this insight in their coachee, which was it's literally like him saying, "Oh yeah, no, it doesn't."
He actually pulls his metaphorical teaching pants down. He kegs him, as we said at school, right in front of everybody.
That makes it sound negative. It's awesome to get an insight.
I've never had a negative kegging.
A gift.
Keggings are always very funny.
We'll have to do a podcast with Ollie Cake.
Oh, please.
Yes. Absolutely. So our other episodes in order, we had cause and effect into mismatch, then into rehearsal, then mapping, variation, engineering insight, and we've finally arrived today at accountable thinking. And we're having a nice little legacy. And you can listen to them in order. Maybe that's advisable because if you jump right in on this, you'll think those guys are off their head. I'm not listening to this anymore. But you're more than welcome to join us at any point along the journey. We've got some really cool things coming up. In the pipeline. I think you're going to be able to catch us again soon at another conferencey thing that might happen in Wales. We're yet to talk about that. That's very exciting. We might be doing something in the Midlands. That's also on the horizon. But whatever happens, you're going to be able to see at least Adam and Sarah. And if you're lucky for I'm basically like the bonus part of the DVD. Do you remember we used to get the making of, and I'll be there going, how does this all work? There'll be at least 2 of the 3 of us doing some Coaching Unpacked live. That is definitely coming, and we can't wait. So please stick along for the journey. Adam, have you had a good night?
It's been brilliant. I've been on residential for the last 3 days, so this has been the energising Thursday night I've needed.
Commiserations. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, good. I just can't wait to visit Adam's school and meet his concrete students.
They are very well behaved. They're stoic. Yeah. They've very fixed mindsets, and they don't move around a lot. It's impressive. It's like it's like an army of statues. It's beautiful to behold. No, to be honest with you, are you going to visit Adam's school, Sarah? Is this happening? Okay, so I haven't visited the actual school, but I went and saw their very first summer performing arts festival. I was lucky enough for Adam asked me to go and perform. They were so good. They were so good. There were some people on the piano, even to the point where a boy randomly ran onto the floor and started playing the floor with drumsticks. It was a brilliant sight, and you're going to absolutely love it. His kids are great. And
I don't know how you got a concrete student to do that, Adam. That's mad.
There was someone behind it. The limbs were articulated by some kind of joint. It's time to end. It's time to end before we get accused of absolute madness. Adam, Sarah, it's always a joy. We've been Coaching Unpacked. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time with some more live coaching. We're waving for people who aren't watching us. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.